going to protecting the economy through fiscal and monetary policy. So there is a note sheet that you have posted under day 5 that goes along with what I'm trying to explain to you today about the Federal Reserve System and the way that the United States government tries to protect you, the consumer, and to protect your savings. So there's more than one way. So you have a copy of the general terms of this lesson already posted, and I'm going to give you some examples and hopefully help you see more clearly what these notes are trying to tell you. So our economy is very important. In fact, without a good economy, you would not be able to enjoy that standard of living that we have here in the United States, which is a much higher standard of living than in other parts of the world. So what makes our economy different? Why is our economy more stable and considered to be the strongest economy in the world? And part of that is that we have a couple of policies in place that our government takes care of to help us keep a stable economy. So we're talking about roller coasters. We don't want our economy to be like a roller coaster, but we're going to pretend that other economies are like roller coasters. And so I'm going to do a little drawing on here for you. So we all know the general outline of a roller coaster. You will have a car start here at a flat area, climb to the top, and then fall down. And this one doesn't have a very steep drop to it because it's more like the U.S. economy. Some of our smaller foreign economies have a lot of highs and lows in them, and so their roller coaster ride might be like this. Some bumps going up as they've got their savings, and then things occur that they might lose their savings either through prices spiking suddenly and goods costing a lot more, so it takes more to buy food and housing. Or their own internal stock markets may experience a crash or recession, or governments could take over part of an economy, and therefore all those investors would lose the return on their investments. So those are the kinds of things that would make that big drop. So we're going to call our roller coaster the econo-coaster, since we're talking about an economy. And we want to talk about what keeps the United States economic roller coaster on the tracks. Well, the reason that our economy is much more stable than the rest of the world is because there are some fiscal policies and some monetary policy that the U.S. government has in place. So you're probably saying, what's a policy? Well, a policy is like a set of rules or a plan, so they come up with a goal. In this case, the goal is to keep our economy nice and flat, not like a roller coaster at all. And so when we come up with a goal, which we're going to talk more about your own goals soon, when you come up with a goal, then you need a way to implement that goal. And so they established an institution from the government, and that's called the Federal Reserve. That institution uses a couple of different plans to keep our economy nice and steady. So So this is just a line picture of how our economy has been in the last couple of years. We want to see steady growth. See this incline of growth? But we don't want to see a dip. So this dip is representing the recession of 2009, which is something that we don't want to go through again. So why do we make a fiscal policy? It's the very first reason is to stabilize our economy when we're in a period of recession. And you may not know what a recession is, but a recession is when you have 2 quarters, which is 6 months, where the economy actually shrinks, so the growth falls. So you can see this dip in the economy. When an economy shrinks, then people have lost jobs, and when they've lost jobs, they've lost their earning power. And when they've lost their earning power and they start living off of their savings, they buy less. So they're no looking for new homes, no looking for new vehicles, no buying computers. They'll wait on that vacation. Those are the kinds of things that they put aside and don't spend their money on because they don't have an income when you don't have a job. In order to have income, we all need to get a job and be productive and work. So a recession, that name means that for 2 quarters or 6 months, or half a year, our economy has slid backwards, and it's usually due to job loss. So on our econo crash ride, this would be a fall, okay? It would get too scary for people when we have a recession because they can't count on their jobs, they can't count on their earnings, and they become afraid and they are not spending money because we have a consumer-driven economy. So we want the ride to be nice and easy. We try to bring ourselves back up out of the recession, even though it's a small dip. In a country with 33 million people, that means millions of people lost savings or lost their job during that recession. The second way that we use fiscal policy, or the government uses fiscal policy, is to keep inflation low. Now, you may not know what inflation means, but inflation means that you pay more for goods or services than you did previously, usually in a shorter period of time. That would be a steep inflation. So suppose you're used to stopping at On the Run in the morning and getting that 79-cent drink. Well, if next week they raise their price on that same drink to $1.25, you're paying more to get the same amount of goods, and that's technically what inflation is. Another example would be cereal. A couple of years ago, you could buy a large box of Fruity Pebbles for $3, and now you pay about $4 for the large box. There is a smaller box available for $3. So another way that you see inflation is if you pay the same amount and you get less for your money. That's also inflation. So it's not just prices going up, but it's how much of something that you get for your money. So the economic crash has remained unchanged if inflation is not out of hand and if growth continues, then we'll see this nice flat line. And that's really the goal, because we don't want that scary ride of boom or bust in our economy. The last way that the government uses fiscal policy to protect the economy and keep this whole thing running smoothly is when they prevent boom or bust cycles, and they stabilize economic growth. So we want that slow, steady growth so people know that they'll get a return on their investment, and they'll continue to believe in our system, to spend money, to get jobs, to be productive, and then that's better for everybody in the United States. So what are some purposes of monetary policy? So monetary policy. So here's the Fed. Here is dollars, or that one's a $100 bill, representing the things that you might want to do. So you might want to borrow some money from the bank, which you got it from the Fed, to buy a car or to buy some land or to buy a home. And so the reason that people are able to do this is if the monetary policy in our country allows us to do those things. So how this works is the Federal Reserve has most all of the money, okay, over here in the Federal Reserve, and they lend it to the smaller banks, the local banks, at a very small interest rate. So they're expecting those local banks to pay back with interest. And how a local bank makes the money to pay the interest is they turn around and loan that money to you, the consumer, at a higher interest rate or a bigger interest rate. So you're paying money back to the local bank that they keep as a profit. And they in turn pay back the Fed because they borrowed that money from the Fed. Now the Fed can keep the interest rate very low, and so that means that banks will go ahead and take the risk. They'll borrow more money at a low interest rate, and then they loan it to the consumer at a, even though it's higher, it's still a relatively low interest rate. And so consumers feel that they can afford to pay the banks back, and the economy is usually running smoothly. And that's easy to do when we have maximum employment. So if you're looking at your notes here on the second page, maximum employment means that most everyone has a job. Here in Southwest Virginia, we had maximum employment in probably before you guys really remember. But before the recession, probably 10 years ago, jobs were so plentiful in this area and labor was in demand, and if you quit your job, you could go down the street, get another similar job at the same rate of pay with full benefits like insurance and vacation pay, and that was not that unusual. You could usually do it in the same day. Well, that was a time of maximum employment when the jobs were plentiful as the laborers who wanted to do the jobs. At this point in time in our area, we do not have anywhere near maximum employment, meaning that there is competition to get the jobs. So because so many people are looking for work, then employers do not have to pay a lot of money. They don't have to offer benefits like they did before in order to get people to do the work. And it's caused people to have to move to other areas of the country seeking work, which means that there are homes for sale in our area. There are empty buildings in nearby Martinsville that haven't had businesses in them in a while. And there's very little disposable income, which means that restaurants and stores have left. As you've seen, our local malls gotten smaller. And so that's what happens when you don't have maximum employment. So we all want maximum employment. So you need to do what you can to select a career that will have a lot of job opportunities. That activity that you just completed should give you an idea if the career you're interested in will have a lot of job openings soon. That's why we did that activity. Now, what happens when you have maximum employment and good interest rates is you have stable prices. And when prices are stable, people are able to plan how they can manage their income and meet their needs, and then they'll have disposable income. They'll buy more things, which means that there are more jobs, and it feeds our economy, and more taxes are paid into the government, and so therefore the government has more money in order to cover the things that it wants to provide. And then the third thing we get from a good monetary policy is we get that interest rate that's steady, a moderate long-term interest rate, so that if you're working and putting money back each week, you're going to see your savings grow just as the economy is growing. So we want that nice stable growth, no highs and lows like a roller coaster, which is what we don't want. So the Fed helps a kind of crash run smoothly by ensuring there's enough money and credit to sustain economic growth without inflation. So this way people can make enough money to meet their needs and also cover some of their wants, which we've talked about in earlier lessons, or we've studied in earlier lessons. Lastly, the Fed has to perform maintenance on economy crash. So they have tools and goods, and that takes money to do so. So some of our tax revenue and that interest that they make when the banks pay the money back to the Fed, they're paying a little bit extra, and they take that money to maintain our economy. So in summary, the United States government uses a fiscal policy, we said a policy is a plan, okay, and a monetary policy, which is a money plan, in order to protect our economy and to promote long-term growth, which looks like this, steadily upward growth of the economy. The protections that fiscal policy provide help in a recession by keeping inflation in check. So fiscal policy is related to recession and inflation. The monetary policy promotes maximum employment, stable prices, and moderate long-term interest rates. Now, yesterday, while we were all working away studying economics, the stock market had some problems with their computer system. And so people in China who had already bought things earlier, because, you know, the land of the rising sun, that part of the country wakes up and does their trading while we're still in bed. So the money they had invested, some of them lost their entire savings. So I'm going to flip over to a link to a CBS News story about losing money and how that's kind of a domino effect in our local economy.
Is going to be going down. And that, what we're arguing, means that the Greek debt is unsustainable on a multi-decade view.
So as he's mentioned, the number of people who are working in Greece as their population grows older is going down. And that is the reason that they've not been able to make their debt payments when they borrowed money. So just like our local banks pay back to the Federal Reserve, and that keeps the money flowing, Greek is not making its payments back to the European Union, and that means that banks are closed, and people in Greece right now are standing in line at banks to try to get enough money to buy basic necessities like food.
As well as thinking about the spread of the machine shop. So the debt default is very much part of what Greece is trying to push. It's what the US, the IMF, seem to support. I mean, I read the IMF report saying that they need the debt default now equivalent to Greece because of the way it's fucked up the economy. And the parallel currency that comes about is very, very badly. If the Germans are not prepared to back view.
Already we've had a conversation with the Greek military saying there won't be IMF issues and they have enough cash at this point to pay pensions and wages. So the IMF doesn't see it as a parallel currency before they want to return to the flat line, which is the worst case scenario when we talk about parallel currency. So what's the most likely scenario?
Okay, so what's happening is that since they are having trouble getting the money from the EU, they're not paying wages. And when workers don't receive their wages, they can't meet their own financial obligations. And so the country of Greece is thinking about, in their parliament, making their own money. So they're going to print their own money, and so the country will have to stand behind its own money. Currently, most of the world uses U.S. dollars, and people in the United States, all of us, we have to stand behind that.
Well, I disagree with the worst case scenario. Carl and Reinhardt were going to that brilliant book, This Time is Different, talking about 800 years worth of debts to follow. Libya, Peru, Argentina twice, and some others like Mexico, and said, look how bad it is when a country devalues. Look at how bad it is that 1 year it devalues and the year after. What she misses, and I was just tweeting, is what happens after that. Year 2, 3, 4, and 5, often much, much better. And if Greece wants to get its unemployment rate down faster, then a parallel currency linked to the drachma is probably the quickest way to do it. And it gives a left-wing government like Syriza more tools to enact the policies it would like to do.
Okay, when he's talking about a left-wing government, he's talking about a government that's leaning toward communism. So if they in fact do that, then it would give the government an incentive or an excuse to go in and take over the working and producing institutions in Greece. Greece has a lot of oil, so they would probably start by taking over their petroleum based companies, and so those investors will likely lose their investment and not be paid what it's worth. Anyway, it's important to see how a failure in fiscal and monetary policy will affect all of the residents of a country.